federal government reached a deal with Google over the Online News Act. Google has agreed to pay about $100 million to Canadian media per year in exchange for Canadian news links staying on their platform. I spoke with the Heritage Minister Pascale St about what this deal means for Canadians on Friday. Minister St, nice to see you. Appreciate you making the time.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I want to start by asking you, I guess, whether you needed C-18, the Online News Act, as it's called now, to get this money from Google, because they were offering you money before, and now you've actually ended up with less.
Yeah, well, what we've seen from tech giants very often is that when they know that a legislation will be brought forward in a country, very often they start having deals with a few news outlets to try to convince governments not to bring legislation forward. So we know that Google had a few deals with some news outlets in Canada, but this is ensuring that there will be $100 million per year adjusted to the inflation that will be coming for our news sector every year. So this is something extremely positive and also historic, because elsewhere in the world, it's most often not very clear how much the platforms are paying. We chose to be transparent. We chose to make sure that every news outlet would get a chance to be at the negotiating table. I'm very happy about this.
I'm not disputing that it is an important move and you don't see it very often. I think that that's fair. I guess I'm just asking whether you needed the law in order to do it, because they were willing to have this conversation with you before, and you've actually got less than what was on the table. So why did you need a law in order to get to this deal?
Well, actually, I don't think that we would have had a deal if there was no legislation either being promised or brought forward. Yes, there was numbers thrown out there, like $172 million per year, but these were always estimates. Last weekend there was an article in CBC Radio Canada that talked about Germany hoping to get $600 million, but actually settled for $4.8 million per year. So I think that we've set a precedent in the world. Like I said, our deal is transparent, and it's revenues that don't exist right now in the system.
Okay, so what are the criteria that you're going to look at to determine what news outlet or business is eligible?
It's already part of the law, so it's listed in the legislation. So basically, we made sure that local newspapers, local newsrooms, that newsrooms from official languages in minority situations, indigenous newsrooms, and of course our traditional media. So independent media also have a seat at the table. So we made sure that unlike other countries where most often it's the bigger news outlets that get deals with those tech platforms, in Canada, it's really all of our diverse news outlet that will be at the table.
There is some concern, I think, though, that most of the money or a large part of the money will go to broadcasters. When this is really also about newspapers, how do you anticipate that breakdown will be between broadcasters and print or digital?
Well, I think we need to bring it back to what this is actually. It's a deal between Google and newsrooms. So first of all, the content needs to be digital for Google to have access to that content. So it is directly linked to digital content that is being referenced on Google. So it is going to be mainly and mostly about written press, but we know that now broadcasters also have websites and write articles, and this is where the market is moving.
Will any money go to the CBC, given that it is already publicly funded with more than $1 billion?
Yeah, again, I understand that the CBC is getting public money, public funds, but at the same time, I think that it's important to respect the principle that for these tech giants, public broadcasters' news also must have value. because they do make money from advertisement with the content produced by a published broadcaster. So yes, there should be a recognition of that and the principles should be respected. But at the same time, I understand that the market is very difficult right now in Canada, but around the world. And we're going to make sure that it's fair and equitable.
So would that mean, I understand you wanting to respect the principle that you're trying to put in place, but would that mean that CBC Radio Canada's money would have a cap on it?
It could look like something like that, and everything will be made public a few days before the legislation comes into action on December 19. Because right now it's under Treasury Board. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Meta, as you know, has still been blocking news links for months in Canada, says it's actually the only way to comply with the law. I just wonder, what is the hope for you that Meta comes up with some change or something in order to comply with the law? Or are they just going to continue to block out access to Canadian news for perpetuity?
Well, on our end, we're going to continue trying to, have Meta comply. And from my understanding, there's also a pending investigation at the Competition Bureau that the broadcasters are trying to move forward. So we'll see where that lands. But it's also, I think, a business decision that Mark Zuckerberg is taking right now, because everywhere around the world, they're toning down the access to news. We're seeing this in the United States. We're seeing them take the news tab out in Europe. They're also saying that they won't renew deals with publishers in Australia. So I don't understand what their business plan is, but it seems like they don't have a problem with leaving Facebook to disinformation and misinformation. And I think that is a big problem.
I do want to ask you about what happened at Heritage Committee this week. You were there to discuss, obviously, this legislation and other things, and Conservative MP Rachel Thomas asked you to speak English, basically, in response to her. I guess there's been some suggestion, Minister, that Rachel Thomas was doing that in order to get a social media clip out of the committee. Do you agree with that suggestion, and is that why you were responding in French? Is that sort of what's going on inside those committees?
Well, I think it was a misplaced comment that she did. She apologized afterwards. The only thing I can say about that is that on my end, answering in French, sometimes difficult questions from colleagues is easier for me in French because it's my mother tongue. And it's important for me to give as answers that are as precise as possible. So this is, and also, it's, I don't think we should question anybody's decision to answer in the language of their choice, because both of them, there is translation. But so that's it. She apologized. I think it's time to, move past that.
Did she apologize to you directly?
She apologized to the chair because she knows that it's our parliamentary privilege to answer in the language of our choice. Yeah,
but she didn't apologize to you directly, the person who was speaking in her mother tongue by choice.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Minister, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
That deal between Ottawa and Google is welcome news to many smaller publishers, but with Meta still blocking their content, it's still not business as usual for those organizations. My next guest is co-owner of one of them, Teresa Blackburn. He's the publisher and co-founder of the River Valley Sun and joins me from Woodstock, New Brunswick. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Rosemary.
What did you make there of what the minister had to say about how this money is going to work and your hopes of getting some of it, I would guess?
I think now that it's settled in for a couple of days and I've listened to her on numerous occasions with numerous media talk about this, I am slightly worried about the little bits we might get. They talk about the importance of this across the board, but I think for ultra local news like ours and people who are on the ground in small communities providing a service to people who, can't get to town council meetings, who can't get to some of these events that we're covering.
For sure.
We're important. I would argue we're probably more important than some of the larger, players in the business when it comes to getting a piece of that pie.
Yeah, it does sound as though broadcasters are going to get a fair amount of money because, again, their work appears on digital platforms as well. And the public broadcaster will get some of that money. I do also wonder for you where that will leave you based on the criteria.
I'm not sure, and we're investigating that ourselves because right now it's a sole proprietorship under myself and my husband is my partner. But we're now wondering if we have to incorporate and what that means, because in the past, some of the grant programming for publications has been available to sole proprietorships. We're small, we're 5 people. And it is a little concerning that if we're going to get such a small part of that pie, what that's going to mean for us in the long term, especially with the loss of Meta. Meta meant we lost money, losing the ability to do live hits or live. We were acting like a big broadcaster in a small town because Facebook gave us access to that digital platform that allowed us to go live in communities, and that's more difficult now.
And it doesn't sound like Meta is headed in the same direction as Google. How troubling is that for you in terms of what you're going to be able to do?
It's very troubling. We did a complete 360 spin there in the summer. We had a website in the works, but we had to kind of curtail things and go quite quickly into the website. And we had a decent following, and we've had that grow ever since, but it's not been to the point of being in the organic nature it was. We're a free model. We are free in stores, free online. There's no paywall with us. And so the advertisers are what pay our salaries. It's what allows us to get freelancers and reporters into communities. And the loss of that meant the loss of a few $1,000s just since August. So those are, it might seem like small margins to large corporations, but that's huge for us. That's, $3,000 to $4,000 as a freelancer for half a year. So we need Meta to get back to the table, but we also need to be considered, I think, more important on the scale. I don't know how, and that's the thing. Heritage Canada is wonderful. They provide these programs and they try to do right by us. Sometimes they do things too little too late, which I think to some degree, getting after Google and Meta, after the horses left the barn kind of deal, it was too little too late. And I think that's why we saw people, Meta saying, nope, we're taking our ball and going home. We were worried about Google doing the same thing. And we're thankful that they didn't do that, because right now, 47% of our traffic to the website, to the new website, comes from Google. So we were terrified that on the 19th we'd be cut off, but we need these social media platforms, and we also need to be considered important. Nobody else is down here covering Woodstock Town Council and Nakawic Town Council and some of the things that have been happening in policing here, and the courts. We're covering courts, and very few people are doing that.
What would you say, Teresa, to those people, though, who are listening to you and saying, well, you have a free model and it's based on advertising, who say, well, maybe you need to adapt. Maybe you should put a paywall in. Like that this is actually a moment when media organizations, all of them, need to take a moment and reassess how they're going to move forward in the digital world.
We started in 2019, and we did that reassessment before we began. We started when people were shuttering, and we knew people don't want to pay for news anymore. And we knew that if we covered the community correctly, and if we went ultra local, everything in our paper is something that happens between Nakawic and Perth Andover, and that's it. And things that are from Fredericton are usually decisions related to the legislature that impact us directly. So we are ultra local, and we did that model beforehand. If we change to the paid model, we're not going to be serving the public like we are. We have companies here that are cutting back. Our competition is Post Media. Post Media has one person covering basically from, I want to say, Macadam all the way up to maybe Edmundston. And that's it. There's no salespeople here. There's nobody at all here. One person. So we're the only alternative for that. The CBC comes here when they can, but you guys have had cutbacks. All of the large players in television come here when something big happens, but nobody's on the ground here. There's very few people on the ground here. So we did our due diligence at the beginning, and if we went to a paid model, we would lose. I really do believe that. The landscape has changed, and people say print is dead. It's not dead. Ultra local print is not dead. Niche print is not dead. If you serve a public and that's your core focus, You will succeed. We have succeeded. We're going to be 5 years old on February 14th of 2024.
Teresa, you are very passionate about your work, and I appreciate that very much. Listen, keep us posted on what happens. I sure would like to know whether you get some of this and how things go. But thank you for talking to me.
I will send a thank you card to Pascale if
no
we get
need.
something.
I'm glad you're here. Thank you, Teresa Blackburn. Nice to meet you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Okay.